Hi everyone, Stepan here. We're playing F4 again. Welcome to game 105. I won my last 3 games, which is great. And I'm hoping to continue the streak. Okay, my opponent is allowing E4. So we will get a Pirtz type of position. Okay, I'm going E4. Usually I would play the bird, but it's very provoking to go D6 so early against the reverse Dutch. He says, YouTuber hanging pawns, good day. Good day, mate. Excuse me. So yeah, D6 aims for a King's Indian slash Pirtz slash modern. Maybe C5 is coming. But the way to punish F4, E4 is to play D5 and to overextend white's center. So when black plays D6, I really have no problems here. And I mean, D5 could still be played, but it would take 2 tempi, and I see no reason not to play E4 straight away, because that's my main strategic goal in the classical Dutch, or the bird, whatever you want to call it, later on in the game. So yeah, this will just be a very standard game in which black is playing a normal modern King's Indian Pirtz, and it will depend on where the c-pawn goes. Okay, I'm definitely playing knight c3. I may even play d4 and transpose into the Austrian attack in the Pirtz, but I'm not sure I want to do that. Black still doesn't have e5. That's one of the main things here. So e5 hangs a pawn. After knight h5, e5 takes. So bishop c4, knight h5, d3, e5, takes. Yeah, I'm going to play d3, not d4. I don't want a standard position, so I'll keep my bishop on c4. Try and put pressure with knight g5 later on and f5. So my plan is to castle kingside and play for f5. And that's why I want this pawn guarding the e-pawn. So I am going to allow e5. And against e5, I will likely play f5, depending on what happens. I have not hung my e-pawn because I have bishop f7, by the way. I should have mentioned that. If knight e4, I don't play knight e4 hanging d5. I just play bishop f7 first. And now d3. Again, I don't want to play d4, even though that's the principled move. I want to stick to my attacking setup. As soon as you go d4, then you are committed to this broad center, which is hard to maintain unless you eventually advance with e5 or d5. And I had a lesson with Elliot. He is a student of mine, and he just finished a tournament. Elliot, if you're watching, yeah, this is very similar to our discussion yesterday. He overextended his center, and it got undermined, and he lost a few moves later. So even though d4 is the principled move, you have to watch out for c5, e5, f5, d5. When you keep your center solid, none of that can happen. I'm just making a square for my bishop and playing against b5. This is almost automatic in all Pirtz modern King's Indian, well, not King's Indian, Pirtz modern and Benoni positions. You don't want to allow an easy b5. And another reason why d3 is easier to maintain than d4 is if b6 in this position followed by bishop b7, I'm not forced to play moves like queen e2, which isn't really something I want to do. I want my queen on h4 ideally. So, excuse me. So having to play queen e2 would arguably be a waste of time. And what I want to do is castle and go queen e1 and queen h4, and maybe even follow that up with king h1 and g4 and either g5 or f5, probably f5. c6. Okay, how many pieces does my opponent have on d5? So now that I have a pawn on d3, d5 is slightly more scary, because if I had a pawn on d4, I could go bishop c2, and on d5, e5, and my center is secure. But I believe I can still go e5, so let's say bishop a2, d5, e5. There's bishop f5, but since the pawn is on d3, that's slightly less scary. If I just allow d5 takes, bishop a2. Yeah, I'm not sure I want to lose a tempo. So and I cannot go bishop c2, bishop a2, because that allows b5, and the rook isn't hanging, so I have to go bishop b3. This plays against d5 and b5. b5 now loses a pawn, because after ab5 is not illegal, but it blunders the rook. And d5 is met with e5, and I'm not really sure where the knight goes. On knight d7, knight c5 is playable, but then I definitely do go d4 to guard c5. And on knight g4, I believe I can go h3 and have to go h3. So my last 3 games I won with the Sicilian, with the Dutch, with the bird. I never thought I would say that sentence. If you've ever watched my videos regularly, you'll know what I play. I play the Caro-Kann, I play the Semi-Slav, I play either d4 or e4 with white, and I play the main lines. And if you haven't been watching the recent videos, in 2025, I'm gonna be playing openings I don't understand, openings that lead to positions I'm uncomfortable in exclusively. So I will combine 2 factors that make me anxious. Factor number 1, not knowing theory or the ideas. Factor number 2, basically being forced to play aggressively because you have conceded some sort of advantage at the beginning, like for example playing f4 on move 1. So if you play the bird or the Dutch or the Sicilian, you've no choice but to play dynamically, and I don't like that. I like static positions in which I have time to maneuver. However, I am of the opinion that you need to force yourself to go outside of your comfort zone. Wait a minute, is queen b6 scary? Do I go bishop e3 first? I don't go bishop e3 because on d5, e5 there is d4. And on queen b6 I have king h1, that's fine. Perhaps I could have played a5. But I didn't want to. Because playing a5 would allow en passant, or sorry, b5 with en passant, and then the rook isn't hanging anymore. Now when my opponent plays knight bd7, I am playing a5, because b5 is playable, the rook is defended by the queen. So if knight bd7, yeah, a5, immediately. Note that on knight c5, bishop a2, queen a5 loses to bishop takes f7 check, loses the queen. So I'm not losing a pawn, and I'm not allowing d5 with tempo. Also, my opponent is about to lose the light squared bishop. I don't know if that's a big deal, but if they don't go knight c5 now, I will play h3. I'm up 4 minutes on the clock. Oof. That's huge. I'm never up on the clock. Another decision I'd made recently, other than playing openings I don't understand and playing positions I don't enjoy, is to play without wasting time on simple decisions. I mean, of course, I'm training for classical chess, but I also want to get good at all time controls, and navigating the time control you're playing is important. I tend to waste time even though I'm not calculating. I don't know if that makes sense, but if you've ever played a game and just your mind wanders and you... Okay, I mean, I'm going to take, obviously, I would have taken if b5 had been played, so I just go king h1 now when they take. Now knight c5 is interesting in this position, because on knight c5 I have bishop e3, and now that the queen is on b6, the knight's pinned, I have bishop e3 followed by knight a4. So I think knight c5 would be a big mistake here. Wait a minute, knight c5, bishop e3. Let's assume the queen moves away from the pin, queen b7 for example. I can take that knight. And even though I've given away my bishop, black's pawn structure is so awful that I think that more than compensates for the bishop. And also, there's no d5. I have e5 because there's no pawn on d6. And the c4 square is available for the bishop because there are no pawns on adjacent files. So knight c5 I feel could be a blunder. Knight c5, bishop e3, queen b7 or queen b8 or queen c7, doesn't really matter. Bishop takes c5, dc5. That's huge. I then have bishop c4 and knight a4, targeting a6 and c5. Yeah, that seems like a disaster. I don't think knight c5 is a reasonable move. Also, I'm up 7 minutes on the clock. So let's continue the streak. I wish I could go 4 out of 4 in the last 4 games. I don't remember winning 4 in a row in a long time. By the way, I bought some coffee in Lidl. It's so bad. I'm out of my usual coffee. I'm not home. And I bought some coffee in Lidl. It wasn't that cheap either. It was maybe €3.50 for 500 grams. Those of you who live in the States, 500 grams in ounces is 16, 17 ounces, something like that. Okay, it's time to play for this light squared bishop. So h3, bishop e6. See, I'm not sure I want to take. h3, bishop e6, takes. Yeah, I don't want to play h3. I do want to play queen e1 and queen h4. So I believe I'm playing queen e1. I also don't want to move my b3 bishop because on knight c5, if I let's say go h3, bishop e6, fe6, knight c5, bishop e3, there's simply queen takes b2 and my knight on c3 is hanging. So yeah, I'm going queen e1. Also this guards the f2 square and unpins my knight, so I have a few more options. Queen f2 is never an option even if my rook moves, and If needed, I can play knight g5, putting pressure on f7, which I may actually be able to do immediately. Also, I should have noted that any knight move after rook b8 would have lost a pawn straight away to bishop takes f7, check, king f7, knight g5, and queen g4. So maybe I should have kept my queen on d1. Perhaps I should have kept my queen on d1. But also, when I play knight g5 now, how does my opponent defend f7? I think I could be much better here. My bishop on b3 is a monster, and honestly, if bishop e6 is not played, I don't see how you're supposed to parry that bishop. Also, if bishop takes f3, then rook f3 followed by rook h3. Yeah, my opponent got scared of knight g5. But now I have two pieces that are able to infiltrate down the h file. Also, f5 is coming. I mean, f5 is coming now. Am I worried about knight e5? f5, knight e5, rook f1. Knight g4 could be an issue, but not really. Okay, I may also consider e5. So e5, if my opponent doesn't take, then I can likely take on d6, takes, queen e7, attacking f7. So let's look at e5, that's the most concrete move. e5, d5, fe5, the knight must move. Then I have e6 and I'm completely winning. e5, if the knight moves away to, let's say, g4, then ed, queen e7, I mean, rook f8 seems to be the only move. But then I take the knight on d7, then knight f2 check, rook f2, queen f2. And how am I supposed to prevent mate and save the c1 bishop? Wait a minute, e5, knight g4. I could throw in h3 and chase that knight away, and then go ed. Yeah, okay. So e5, knight g4, h3, knight h6, ed, queen e7 resigns. Attacking f7 and d7. Yeah, okay, this works. e6 is a devastating threat. ed is a devastating threat. Obviously, ef loses the knight. Taking is bad. Not taking is bad. I believe I could be winning here. All of my opponent's pieces are over on the queen side. And my two bishops guard everything. The a pawn cannot move, so I don't really see a huge purpose to having all your pieces on the queen side. The only thing that worries me is knight g4, and if my queen moves, knight f2 check. So on knight g4, I think I just take. Sorry, not take on d6, but play h3 and then take on d6. Am I just winning? e5 could just be winning. Knight g4, I think, has to be losing. Knight g4, h3. Knight h6 only move. Oh, that guards f7. Maybe I don't play h3. Huh. I do have f5, eliminating the knight and taking on f7. So let's look at that. Knight g4, h3, knight h6, f5. Knight, no. First ed6, ed6, f5. But then there is rook e8. Knight g4, h3, knight h6, ed6, ed6, queen e7. My opponent just moves the d knight. And then plays rook e8, followed by mate on e1. So if I go h3, I have to go f5 and take that knight. But when I go f5, on knight f5, that prevents queen e7. On ef5, of course, I go bishop h6, queen e7, and I win. Yeah. So, ed6 seems scary. But is it scary? So let's have a look at the most concrete line. Let's have a look at the most concrete line. ed6, ed6. Queen e7, knight f2, rook f2, queen f2. Wait a second. ed6, ed6, queen e7, knight f2, rook f2, queen f2, queen f7, king h8. And I cannot take the knight because of queen f1 mate or queen e1 mate. Do I have any intermezzo moves? Oh, I can play e6. I don't have to take on d6. So on e6, fe6 loses one of the knights to bishop e6 or queen e6. So my opponent has to play knight f6 or knight c5. On knight c5, I take on f7. e6, the only move is to move the knight, and the knight probably must go to c5. ef7. King h8. And then I just move the bishop to a2. Okay, that's promising. Let's look at h3 again. h3, knight h6. ed6, ed6, queen e7. Knight f6, and I don't really have anything. So not h3. Definitely not h3. But I can throw in knight a4 to prevent knight c5. So knight a4, the queen moves, it has to move to a7. Otherwise, ed6. Knight a4, queen a7. And now I play e6. And on knight c5, I take, queen takes, and I take on f7 and I'm up a pawn. Does that make sense? I believe so. Okay, that's what I'm gonna do. I want to prevent knight c5 and I want to go e6. I think this is an important intermezzo. Of course, if the queen leaves this diagonal and let's say goes to b7 or to b5, then I'm just winning with ed and my plan of queen e7, a double attack. Well, this should be losing. Don't I have bishop d2? This is losing. Now I've connected my rooks. My back rank isn't weak. Yeah, this is bad. Of course I'm not going to trade queens. I'm going to play e6 and win material. Or, okay, yeah, now ed. ed is winning. ed, if ed, then queen e7. ed, if not ed, then what does my opponent do? e6, I play bishop e6, f e6, queen e6, check and take the knights. Yeah, busted. Busted! There's just too much pressure on my opponent's position. Queen h5 does nothing, I just go rook h3. Let's just double check. Queen e7, I'm winning. Attacking the knight, attacking f7, it's game over. Also attacking d6. On queen h5 I take on f7 and go h3. What is that? Okay, what's the easiest way to convert this? Now I'm thinking bishop c4. Bishop c4, the queen must go to b7. Is that correct? That's correct. Then I play bishop takes f7. My opponent's king moves. Then I exchange queens and take on c5. Is that true? That seems to be true. Bishop c4, queen b7. Bishop f7, king h8. Queen b7, Well, there's knight b7. Sure. Okay, I'm playing bishop c4. I'm going to throw in this intermezzo, because I just don't want my opponent's queen to end up covering one of these two squares. Okay, the bishop pair, up a pawn, ruined pawn structure. I think I have converted my advantage. Well, doesn't this lose a pawn? It does indeed. I'm just gonna take, because I don't see why not. Okay, I have to watch my back rank, so I have to play rook f1, I think. Rook f1, knight f2, I go king g1. It's not that simple. I may have to go g3. Maybe rook f1 is losing. Maybe I should go g3 to give my king a light square. Now I see that on rook f1 there is knight f2, king g1, and bishop d4. So yeah, g3 seems fine. g3 covers everything. Because I want the light squares for my king, not the dark squares. Bishop d4 is extremely worrying. Yeah, this is a pretty clean game now. Okay, wants to play rook g1 check. So what do I do? I still have 4 minutes on the clock, I don't have to rush. I could sack a pawn with rook f1. So rook f1, king f1, knight takes h2, king g2, knight g4. That should still be winning. I can also sack a pawn with king h3, h5, king h4, although I don't really like that. So I think it's rook f1. Rook f1, king f1, knight h2, king g2, knight g4, and then king f3. Yeah, that's winning enough. I don't have to complicate things. I know that I'm giving the pawn back, but I have the bishop pair, and these are terminally weak, so, and my king is coming in. This should be a relatively easy conversion. Okay, I think it's simple now. I'm gonna pick up the c-pawn. If I don't know where the knight should go, I'm not sure, but I don't see a way to save the c-pawn wherever it goes. My king is better than my opponent's king. My minor pieces are better than my opponent's minor pieces. And I'm winning. Oh, that just loses the bishop, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. I'm trapping the bishop. On bishop g1, I have king g2. Yeah, okay, this is... I mean, now I'm up a piece. Okay, I'm very happy with this game. Maybe I didn't convert cleanly, but it's 4 in a row. Let's go. Go on. Okay, let me turn on the thing. Wait, did I? Ah, okay, it should be fine, I hope. Let's analyze. Let me expand this thing so that you can see everything. Okay. So let's see. I'm guessing e4 is correct here. Okay, most people play knight f3 still. Okay, but e4 must be fine. Knight f3. Okay, d4 of course transposes to the modern or the Pirtz. e5 immediately. Okay, I played knight c3. I constantly should have gone e5. I didn't. this is fine. Okay, I should have thrown in h3, but okay. d4. Yeah, okay, e5. Come on! I played e5. Now let's see, knight g4. e6 immediately. Okay, but knight a4 is good. Yes! The reason I wanted to play e6 is because if takes, then I just pick up both knights. Or one of the knights. But knight a4 just delays that for a moment. And I think my opponent had to stay on the diagonal. Now I get to develop my bishop and... Wait, still e6? Okay, I didn't know what was better, taking and queen e7 or e6. Now the knight has to move. I take on f7. That's what I would have done. King somewhere. And queen e7, yeah. This is better. I was afraid of rook e8, but the rook cannot come to e8. Okay. ed, queen e7. Bishop c4 is such a big mistake. You see, this is my mentality of wanting to trade queens when I'm up material. I want to get this position where I'm up a safe amount of material and everything has been traded off. Wow. Yeah, the bishop isn't attacked at all. Yeah, g3. Okay, rook f1 works. I can see the engine lines here, but I was afraid of knight f2, king g1 and bishop d4. I didn't know what to do here. And apparently I have to go for a draw with c3. So g3, good choice. Bishop b3, rook a1 check here. Yeah, rook f1 winning, of course, because the endgame is winning. But it was still a draw? With rook d1? Wait a minute, rook d1. Okay, I only have one square, bishop a5. And now bishop d4. What's the difference? Okay, if I go rook f1 now... Rook f1 now, there is knight e3! Oh my! So there was a trick in this position. Rook d1 first, chasing my bishop away from e3. Okay, and then after this rook f1, this is just winning. Yeah, I don't think... I mean, maybe my conversion wasn't perfect, but I don't care. I know that this is winning. c3 traps the bishop, so it's easy, but even if my opponent doesn't blunder king f6, it's still very much game over. I'm not sure I would have played c3. I don't think I would have. I would have played bishop e1, bishop f2 to get a bishop versus knight endgame where I'm just simply winning. But okay. All in all, I'm happy with this game. 4 in a row. Let's go. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.